Kuf Pei Zayin, which is page 618 in the bilingual edition. So it's very appropriate. We're learning this on Pesach because the Ramban, the famous Ramban at the end of Parshas Bo, says, why do we focus so much on Passover? The leaving of Egypt is a theme which constantly comes up in Judaism, not just on Pesach, but every day. The mitzvah to remember it and many other mitzvahs. So he says it wasn't just back in the day. There were different types of idolatry. It wasn't just that people didn't believe in God. There were a group of people that didn't believe in God, but there were a group of people also that believed in God, but also believed that he didn't have anything to do with the world. He created the world and then he just kind of left it alone. And famous deism, the famous deists you might have heard of, like Thomas Jefferson. So when Hashem did the miracles at Yetzias Mitzrayim, it showed that no, he's involved with the world. He didn't just create the world, but he also is involved with the world, that he does miracles to save the righteous, and he punishes the wicked. So you see, God is intimately involved in the world, and that's the idea of prophecy. The whole idea of prophecy is that God communicates with his creations. God communicates with us. So if he's communicating with us, that means he's involved in the world, which is the major idea on Pesach. Something I read which has nothing to do with this, which I thought was inspirational. Rav Gedalia Shor writes that that we know that the word of Pesach means to pass over, is to skip. So he says on Pesach you could climb spiritual levels and you could skip many levels. You don't have to go step by step on Pesach. You can gain huge leaps and bounds in spirituality on Pesach. He has many sources for this, but I don't remember them offhand. But you could look in there. It's on his piece in the third volume on Pesach. Okay, so Kuf Bezan. This was the earth question. So what did we talk about last week? We talked about that Hashem communicates to prophets, and the way he communicates to prophets is by showing them pictures, by showing them images and visions. And we said that these visions, they are not visions of Hashem himself, Hashem's essence. Hashem's essence, we don't even talk about. God has no image, nothing like that. Any time that the Torah or Tanakh describes God in physical terms, that is just a metaphor. That's why you have to be very, very careful anytime you read something. You always have to have a Rebbe. Why? Because you could read something in Chumash, you could read something in Tanakh, and you take it literally. It's not meant to be taken literally. You have to know which things are meant to be taken literally, which things are metaphors, and for that you need a Rebbe. That's why we can't just learn, from books. You have to have a teacher. There's a prominent rabbi out there now who is he's saying things, and my Rosh Yeshiva was very upset because he's saying things that are heretical. Where did he get these things? He read things in Kabbalah that were meant to be taken as metaphors, and he took them literally, and because of that, he came out with heretical ideas that he preaches to many people. So it's very, very problematic, and we have to be very careful anytime we learn these things to have a Torah teacher. Okay, so now we talked about how also that a prophet sees the images, and we said that he sees it. The prophet sees the images through a mirror. It's not a direct seeing of these images, and these images are created by Hashem to give the prophet a message. Now we begin with Yair's question. What's the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and the other prophets? It's a fundamental tenet of Judaism, a fundamental tenet of faith, that the prophecy of Moses is different than the prophecy of other prophets. Right? The whole Torah was given through us through prophecy. And we know that the 5 books of Moses, the Chumash, are on a different level prophetically, and the way we treat the laws from the Torah than the Nach from Nevi'im and Ksuvim. Totally different level. Because why? Because the nature of the prophecy with Moshe was totally different. But the way he's describing it now, it sounds like that the nature of the prophecy of Moshe is the same. So that's what he's going to ask. Kuf Pei Zayin. Amar Anashama. Avalata Yikshali Shalafi Devarech. According to what you said, Ein Hefesh Ben Nevuas Moshe L'Shar Nevi'im. There's no difference between the prophecy of Moses and the other prophets. Kikulam Roim Hatmuna Azos. They all saw these images. The Kulam Roim She'Ein Tmuna Lo Yizbarach L'Fiat Musa Amiti. So they saw images, and they both didn't see God's essence. Even Moshe didn't see Hashem's essence, right? Yair was asking, when Hashem, quote-unquote, passed in front of him, Hashem doesn't really have a back, Hashem's not really tzitzis. There was a certain revelation that Hashem showed Moshe that the other prophets were not able to see. But he's asking now, if Moshe didn't see Hashem's essence, and the other prophets didn't see Hashem's essence, and they just saw these images of Hashem, what was the difference between Moshe and the other prophets? And it's such an important thing. This is not just a side point in Judaism. This is a fundamental tenet of our faith, that Moshe's prophecy was different because Moshe was communicated directly by Hashem, which he's going to explain, and the Torah was given to it. All the Klal Yisrael, all the Jewish people heard the first 2 commandments from Hashem, and they also heard that Moshe is the trusted servant from God himself. So now once God said that to the Jewish people, you can trust that everything that Moshe says is on a different level than the other prophets. Amra Seichel, says the intellect. Now I'm going to tell you an important difference between Moses and the other prophets. Kishar Hanavim Afilo Hadmus Hazelo Yochel Lahabit Boabatimur. Even this image that was created to show the prophets in their prophetic visions, it was not they didn't see it with a clarity, a clear vision. It was like they saw it beyond a wall, behind a wall, or kamamars, or seen through several mirrors, or mara bilti mutzachtzachas, or through a non-clear mirror. In fact, the Medrash itself, and this verse says this. What does the Medrash say? What is the difference between Moses and the other prophets? Rabbi Yehuda says, Kol hanavim ra'u metoch tesh'as balkarios. The other prophets saw through 9 mirrors. Moshe metoch aspaklaria achas, and Moshe saw through 1 mirror. Rabban and Amr and the rabbis say, Kol hanavim ra'u metoch aspaklaria mulchachas. All the rabbis saw through a dirty mirror. Moshe metoch aspaklaria mitztechach, and Moshe saw through a clear mirror. Let's see, he's going to explain this. V'hinei v'yosef filo had the most hanir lehem enim yichon liros also heitev in le'asigo sovignon. Since the other prophets weren't able to see the image with total clarity, they weren't able to get to the total depth of everything possible. Umamela gamin hapisrun yachsar lehem harbe. So therefore, their interpretation was lacking. But that pasuk is obvious. Hashem is only showing them these images to give them certain ideas, certain prophetic ideas, certain knowledge. When they saw this image, they would see all the ideas that Hashem was trying to convey to them. If they weren't able to perceive the entire image, only a little part of the image, then they weren't able to understand the idea in every aspect of it. So rather, they only were able to perceive the idea, part of the idea, which corresponded to the part of the image they could see. So the other prophets, they were limited into the clarity of each part of the picture that Hashem showed them. Therefore, they were limited in what they perceived as the ideas concealed within that image. However, Moshe saw the entire image totally clear, 100% clear. So Moshe was able to perceive the image and therefore the prophetic ideas more than any other created being ever could perceive. Everything Moshe saw was totally clear. The other prophets not so. And Moshe achieved the highest level possible of prophecy. But even Moshe was only able to see the permission, or what Hashem gave him permission to see. Like we said, Moshe did not see Hashem's essence, right? Moshe was still a lower level, but Moshe saw what was the greatest ability for a human being to see. However, even he was only saw what Hashem permitted him to see. Right? So again, what's the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and the other prophets? According to the Ramchal says that Moshe Rabbeinu saw everything totally clear. Whatever Hashem wanted him to see, he saw the image clearly and was perceived, and every message that Hashem was going to show him. Whereas the prophets, certain aspects of the images, they weren't clear, and therefore certain aspects of what they were told, they were not able to totally perceive. So it was on a lower level. If you look at the Rambam has other differences, like Moshe spoke to Hashem. Right? I'm not sure how this, what the Ramchal is saying, works with what the Rambam says, that Moshe spoke to the prophets like we're speaking now. Here it seems like Moshe also saw certain images, so I'm not sure exactly how that works. But whatever it is, we see that the prophecy of Moshe was qualitatively different than the other prophets. Okay. I'll just 2 more minutes, finishes. I want to speak a little more on one aspect of this prophecy. I think we mentioned this before, that even though we keep saying images, the prophets saw images. When we say they were seeing images, it is not like we see something using our eye. Right? I can see this table now. When we say they saw images, it was not using any physical ability such as the eye, but rather it was perceived through their soul, through their neshama. Hihine, it was a certain seeing. We're just calling it seeing, to use a borrowed word, but it was a certain seeing that their neshama saw it. Right? You have certain. I think we mentioned this before that. You have certain. It says he didn't perceive it, but his mazel perceived it. There's certain things that a human being can perceive through his neshama. Right? Especially if you're a very holy person. You can perceive something through your neshama that you don't perceive through the physical senses. So this perception that the prophet had is totally through his neshama. So a person can perceive something by the physical eye and by the soul, which is beyond anything physical. However, the seeing of the physical eye is different from the seeing of the soul. Right? The soul could technically see something, in quotes, that's behind the wall or in a barrel. But the physical eye can't see that, right, unless you're Superman. Your eye can only see based on the physical limitations that God gave you. The physical eye could see the barrel, but they're both but the physical eye and the spiritual eye can see the barrel, and they're going to perceive that it's a barrel, but the method of the way that's happening is different. The way the soul perceives something is different than the way the physical eye perceives something. So too here. Now let's say Hashem is showing a prophet the image of a lion or an eagle. Let's say a lion to show that his power. That's what Hashem wants to convey to the prophet. When we say that the prophet saw a lion, like you see in Tanakh, that doesn't mean that with his physical eye he saw a lion. Rather, Hashem placed an image of a lion in his neshama, which he was able to perceive. So the perception of a prophet, even though we're using, because we don't have any other word to describe it, but even though we're using the word see, it is not a physical seeing. So I think we'll stop here in this section. The next section is very interesting. He's going to discuss, maybe Bli Neder next week, why does Hashem communicate through images in the first place? Hashem could communicate any way he wants to a prophet. Why is he doing it to these prophets through images? Right? You look through Tanakh, you see that Yechezkel saw a chariot with different faces on it and different things. Why did Hashem decide that that's the way he wants to communicate with prophets? So that's going to be discussed the next time. We're almost done. We're almost done with the Sefer. So after, I was thinking of Shari Chu if people wanted to learn, I don't know, other things.